大家好，欢迎你们来到我的 YouTube channel。如果你不知道，我叫苏妮，英文名字是 Emily。我今年27岁，住在波士顿，做我的博士学习。但今天不是介绍我自己，是告诉你们我学中文的故事和经验。好，我现在换到英文。Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about my experience learning Mandarin and specifically learning Mandarin as an adoptee. So I have some notes over here, so if I'm just looking in this direction, that's why. But yeah, let's get into it. So I will probably be saying like Mandarin and Chinese interchangeably, although I do want to recognize that under the umbrella of Chinese, there's a lot of different languages, a lot of different dialects that fall under that. So I definitely don't want to make it seem like those two things are the same thing. I'm just going to be switching it up for the sake of you all not having to hear me say Mandarin 100 times. For the context of this video and also just kind of future adoptee topics, my parents are white, so I identify as a transracial adoptee as well as a transnational adoptee. I was born in China, specifically the province of Hunan, and then I was adopted when I was 9 months old and brought to the United States. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and kind of lived there until I graduated high school and went off and did my adult things. One of the things that my parents really wanted for me was to learn more about my culture, and one of the big components of that, I think, for them at least, was language. What they did when I was 4 years old is they sent me to an immersion school in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so the immersion school was set up, at least at the time, where half of the day was in English and half of the day was in Mandarin. And so from pre-K to 8th grade, basically what I experienced was learning language arts, writing, math, science, music, and other things in both English and in Chinese. I attended this school from the age of like 4 to around 13 whenever you go to high school, and I really was able to kind of like, even as I was just developing and learning English, to be able to like learn Mandarin alongside it. You know, overall, I'm very grateful for this experience. I think that it's definitely like I was able to do it because my parents are upper middle class and could afford to send me to this school. I do know and acknowledge that this is not like an opportunity in terms of like access, like even just having access to a school like this that other Chinese American adoptees have. So I definitely want to highlight that, although my friend, who is also a Chinese American adoptee and might be watching this video, hello Camille if you are, told me to kind of reframe it. I used to talk about how going to an immersion school and learning Mandarin and learning a little bit more about Chinese culture was like a privilege, and they helped me kind of reframe it as like I was definitely lucky to be adopted into a family who could afford to do that and prioritize doing that for me, but it definitely is not a privilege, because as an adoptee, really every adoptee should have the right to be able to have an experience like that and to do that. So I definitely appreciated that perspective and that reframe. To be honest, going to an immersion school, I think when I was younger, I didn't think much of it when I was younger, because it was just kind of, you know, you go to school and like you do what you're supposed to do, and like that's like all you know really. But I think that as I got older, and then also as I kind of like reflected on being in that school a little bit more, there weren't like only Chinese students there, but it was predominantly Chinese and predominantly Asian American, and specifically like more affluent families because of the tuition costs of the school. So again, keep that in mind for kind of the context of like the environment that I was in. But it was a little bit weird because you would think that, oh, if you go to a school like that, you automatically are going to kind of see yourself reflected in like your classmates and your teachers, and oh, that should really help a lot with your identity and feeling accepted and like whatnot. But to be quite honest, I think if anything, I felt extremely, especially as the years went on, I felt extremely kind of othered. And then as I got older and kind of like talked to my parents about this a little bit more and reflected more with my friends, there was definitely not only like a great deal of like classism and elitism at that school, but also some, not all, but some teachers and some parents of my classmates kind of treated me and other adopted students was different because we had white parents. And then just outside of that, I think it's really strange when you go to school and, again, in theory, like see yourself reflected and represented, and then you go home and you don't have that. And so like a lot of times when I was doing my homework, like my Chinese homework, I was on my own, because if I didn't finish it at school and like get help from teachers who were there and like extended day care, you know, I had to do it at home and I had to kind of figure it out on my own. In a lot of my schooling, in terms of doing my homework, like a lot of it was a very like isolating experience. And I don't mean that in like a way of saying I didn't have friends. Like I definitely had friends and I'm still talk to a lot of them today, but just a lot of the kind of things I was feeling at the time, or the things that I was experiencing, felt very isolating, even if I wasn't alone, if that makes sense. So like the other piece to this too, right, is that I personally, and this is again my experience, this is not necessarily true for all adoptees, but my experience was that I not only felt like I didn't quite fit into my Chinese identity, my Chinese American identity, or my like fit in exactly with my parents and like their extended family. It's definitely lonely at times. With these feelings of kind of isolation and just otherness also came a lot of feelings of shame. And so it's, again, very, very interesting when you hear like a lot of anti-Asian like sentiment, xenophobia, like Orientalism from the external world, and then also feel like you don't even fit into the group that the outside world is trying to like place you into. So I felt a lot of shame, not only in just being Asian American, which I think as I talk to a lot more of my friends and a lot of just other folks who identify as Asian American, this is like a very common recurring thing. Just felt a lot of shame, like it really wasn't cool. And I was very aware of that since I was young. Yeah, and like I didn't think it was like cool to speak Chinese. It was one of those languages that a lot of people like made fun of, like the accents like people made fun of. I think that there was definitely like a problematic, like this was a problematic fetishization, but like for Spanish, it was like, ooh, that's like sexy and hot and like different. Whereas with Chinese, people were like, that's weird. Like, why are you speaking that? So I felt just some type of way about that. And because of that, I really, outside of school, I didn't really use, and because, you know, with my parents not speaking Mandarin, I didn't really use it that much. And so then once I left my immersion school and kind of went to high school and took the AP Chinese test, and I got a 5, by the way, but you know, once I took it, I didn't really speak it anymore, and I didn't really use it for the rest of high school, and honestly, like even in college. And it wasn't until I graduated college and started my first job at a high school working in college access that I started to use it again. And then I had lots of feelings of shame around the fact that I felt like I had kind of lost a lot of my Chinese, and that my Mandarin just like, it very clearly wasn't good. I felt really like embarrassed to speak Chinese because I like, even though my pronunciation was probably fine, I had forgotten a lot of words. I didn't know slang. Like that's another thing about learning Chinese in school and not learning it from your friends or like your family, is that you learn like the type of stuff that you learn in school. So like no one was teaching me swear words. No one was telling me like how to talk about things that are maybe like more inappropriate. Like I didn't know any of that. I remember we had this buddy exchange thing in 8th grade. When I was there, I remember we were in the grocery store. I was in the grocery store with my buddy and her mom, and she said, 我无所谓, which basically means like, I don't care either way. But I didn't know what that meant because I had never heard that phrase used before. And she kind of like looked at me like, how do you not know that? Like, how do you not know what that means? The other feeling of shame was like, did my parents waste their money by sending me to this immersion school only for me to like not use my Mandarin or forget it. But ultimately, I realized that all of those feelings, while valid, were also not necessarily true. So the way I kind of reconnected with it and found it again was when I first worked my job after college in College Access, as I mentioned, where some of my students spoke Mandarin, and many of them had like relatively recently immigrated to the United States. So Mandarin was kind of, even though it wasn't like their dialect, it was a bit more comfortable than speaking English. And so I just like credit a lot of my students to helping me. I don't know, I guess like I never really felt like they were judging me when I was speaking Mandarin, and they were all very encouraging in trying to get me to speak more with them and to practice, and I'm just very grateful to them. Again, let me not get emotional, but I'm just very grateful to them because they kind of helped ease me back into it. And I still remember when like one of my students brought me a 粽子, which is like, I'll put a photo of what that is here, but that his grandmother had made, and they were like bringing me snacks and like talking to me about stuff, and it just like, it was really nice. Then fast forward like a year later, when I was in my first year of my PhD program, K-pop actually helped me kind of bring me back even further to like, I guess, my Asian American identity and just like my desire to kind of rediscover and relearn my Chinese culture. Shout out to GOT7. In kind of rediscovering my Mandarin, I realized there was a little bit of realization like, oh, I had forgotten a lot, but there was also some realization that I hadn't lost everything. Like I hadn't actually lost as much as I thought I did. And the more that I used it, the more that I was speaking it with people, just the easier and more natural it started to feel. It's also very interesting to me because a lot of people tend to like look at me and they hear me speak. This is like for basically anybody, not just like white people or Chinese people, but they look at me and they assume that I don't speak another language. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but it's always very interesting when they like, now it's like kind of fun. I don't know if fun's the right word, but now a lot of the time they're very like pleasantly surprised when they find out I can speak another language. So ultimately, right, like my Mandarin is still a work in progress. I still don't necessarily think that I feel just as comfortable using Mandarin as I do English, but I am very excited that, you know, lately at least, I feel like I can read a text message from my friends in Mandarin without too much difficulty, and like I can know what they're saying. I've been working with a Mandarin tutor. I meet with her every other week, and part of our exercises are me reading like short kind of like excerpts of, or like short lessons or short stories. I don't really know what to call them in English. Short readings, I guess, would be the name for them. But I find that like reading them has actually gotten a little bit easier. The other piece to that is like, I eventually want to take the 汉语水平考试, which is the HSK, and that's kind of the Mandarin proficiency test. And I would love to take HSK 6 and like pass it. Looking forward, my hopes for myself are to just continue practicing, to again, like take the HSK 6 and pass. I would love to, you know, travel to China, even like live and work in China for a little bit, and just really immerse myself, I guess. I hope you found this semi-unstructured, maybe a little chaotic talk helpful, or at least just kind of interesting to listen to. I hope some of it maybe resonated with you, even if you're not a Chinese American adoptee. And yeah, I appreciate you all listening to me talk about this. I actually publicly have not talked that much about my own identity or my adoption experience, so this is definitely new for me, but it felt really good. I hope everyone has a great week, stay safe, and I will see you in the next one. 谢谢大家, bye!